The sun in Albuquerque has a way of burning through everything: clouds, shadows, and sometimes even memories. I grew up beneath that relentless sky, in a small adobe house on the edge of the desert where the wind carried the scent of piñon pines and the hum of distant highways. My name is Alex Rivera, and if you'd met me at 28, you might have seen a confident prosecutor fighting for justice in the city's crowded courtrooms. But to understand how I became that man, you'd have to travel back to where it all began, when I was just a forgotten child in a world too busy to notice. My parents, Marcus and Isabella Rivera, were what people in town called a golden couple. My father was a rising soccer star, tall and charming, his smile plastered on local billboards. My mother, a sharp-eyed journalist, seemed born for spotlights and microphones. Together, they were lightning in a bottle, beautiful, ambitious, and utterly consumed by their dreams. Then came me. I wasn't part of their plan, just a pause in their pursuit of fame. When I was 6 months old, they drove me to my grandparents' house on the outskirts of the city. My father kissed my forehead. My mother whispered, "We'll be back soon." And then they were gone. They never came back, but in that act of abandonment, my real story began. My grandparents, Judge Elias Rivera and his wife Clara, became my entire world. Their home stood low against the desert horizon, sun-baked walls, a red-tiled roof, and a porch that smelled of sage after rain. Inside, it was filled with warmth, Clara's laughter, the scent of cinnamon from her baking, and Elias's deep voice echoing from his study. Elias was a man of quiet authority, with silvering hair and eyes that missed nothing. He spent his days in courtrooms defending the principles he lived by and his evenings teaching me that justice was more than law. It was compassion guided by truth. Clara, gentle and nurturing, taught me how to see beauty in small things. The way sunlight caught on cactus needles, how herbs healed, and how love could live in simple acts of care. I learned early that family wasn't defined by blood, but by devotion. Mornings began with Clara's soppapillas dusted with sugar, and her humming old folk songs, as I helped her tend the garden. Evenings belonged to my grandfather. We'd sit by the window under a fading orange sky, as he read to me from his thick law books. Justice, Alex, he used to say, isn't about winning, it's about protecting what's right, when no one else will. Those words carved themselves into my soul, but even in that haven, shadows lingered. I used to lie awake, listening to the wind scratching against the windows, wondering why my parents never returned. Did they ever think of me? Did I mean anything to them? The question sat heavy on my heart, like a stone I couldn't put down. One evening when I was 8, we were playing checkers at the kitchen table. The air smelled of roasted chilies and rain-soaked earth. I looked up at my grandfather and finally asked, "Why didn't my parents want me?" He paused, setting his piece down gently. "Some people," he said softly, "spend their lives chasing what they think will make them happy. But others, people like your grandmother and me, we live for something greater. Your parents chose their path, Alex. We chose you." His words didn't erase the ache, but they transformed it. I wasn't a mistake. I was chosen. Loved. As the years passed, I flourished under their guidance. I helped Clara with her herbs, learned to bake bread without burning the edges, and memorized my grandfather's legal maxims as if they were scripture. But time, as always, moved on. When I was 14, my grandparents began to age in ways I didn't want to see. Clara's hands trembled when she baked. Elias's once confident stride slowed. Still, they smiled through every weakness, determined to keep our home filled with laughter. Then, one evening, the past returned. I was in my room studying when I heard a knock at the door. My grandfather opened it, and standing there were Marcus and Isabella, my parents. I barely recognized them. My father's hair was streaked with gray, my mother's face sharper, colder. They hugged me, but their touch felt unfamiliar, almost rehearsed. Over dinner, they spoke not of love or regret, but of financial troubles, failed ventures, mounting debts. My grandfather, kind even in disappointment, lent them money quietly. They left soon after, promising to visit again. They did, but only when they needed more. It didn't take long for me to understand that their visits weren't about me. They were about what they could get. One night, I woke to the sound of shouting in the living room. My father's voice thundered, accusing my grandfather of hoarding wealth. "You owe me, old man," he roared. Elias's calm response cut through the air. "I owe you nothing but the truth. You abandoned your child, and now you return only for gain." I stood in the hallway, trembling, realizing how fragile goodness could be in the face of greed. From then on, something inside me hardened, not in anger, but in determination. I wanted to be like Elias, steadfast, moral, unshakable. I poured myself into school, driven by a silent promise to make them proud. When I turned 19, I earned a scholarship to law school. By then, Clara's health had worsened. She coughed often, growing pale and tired, but she still smiled through every moment. My father's visits became more aggressive, his demands bolder. Then came the night that changed everything. He arrived furious, demanding a share of the estate. My grandfather refused. Voices rose. Clara, pleading for peace, suddenly collapsed. I remember her hand slipping from mine, her body limp as we called for help. She never woke again. My father left before the ambulance arrived. I watched the lights fade into the distance, realizing that some people never change. Her funeral drew the whole town. Everyone came to honor the woman who had given so much love to others. Everyone except my parents. After that, my grandfather retired. The house grew quieter. He spent his days tending Clara's garden, his eyes lost in memories. I became his strength, studying harder, working part-time jobs, and sending him letters filled with gratitude. His replies were always thoughtful, written in careful script. "Justice is a journey of the heart, Alex. Walk it with courage." Those words carried me through sleepless nights and long exams. When I finally graduated, I found him waiting at the ceremony. His hands shook as he placed them on my shoulders, tears shining in his eyes. "You've done it," he said. "Clara would be so proud." That moment felt like the closing of a sacred circle. Returning home as a young prosecutor, I worked tirelessly to live by the values they'd taught me. Every case I took reminded me of their lessons. Justice wasn't about punishment, but protection. My grandfather, though older and frailer, insisted on discussing each case with me over our old checkers board. He'd nod thoughtfully, saying, "Justice must breathe through compassion, Alex. Never forget that." One morning, I found him in his chair by the window, his diary open beside him. He was gone, his face peaceful. The final words on the page read, "Justice lives in the believing heart." I sat beside him for a long time, the desert wind rustling through the curtains, tears blurring the ink on those pages. Everything I was, every ounce of strength and conviction, came from the love of two people who had chosen me when others walked away. That day, I made a vow. I would carry their legacy forward. I would live and fight for the kind of justice that had saved me, a justice born not from laws alone, but from love. After my grandfather passed, the city of Albuquerque felt strangely muted, as if the sun itself mourned him. The house that had once pulsed with warmth now echoed with quiet memories, Clara's laughter, Elias's calm wisdom, the creak of the old checkers board. I tried to keep busy, handling his affairs with the same precision he'd taught me, but grief hung in the air like dust after a desert storm. The funeral drew people from every corner of the city, judges, lawyers, neighbors, even those he'd once ruled against. They came to pay tribute to a man whose fairness had shaped countless lives. I stood near his portrait, listening as one person after another shared how he had changed them. But when I saw my parents arrive, Marcus and Isabella, impeccably dressed, faces composed but eyes calculating, I felt my stomach twist. They hadn't come to grieve. They had come to see what was left to take. A week later, I sat in the office of Samuel Hart, my grandfather's lifelong friend and attorney. The will was simple, written in Elias's steady hand. The entire estate, his home, investments, and savings, totaling over $3 million, was left to me. My father received a single object, the worn leather diary that had rarely left my grandfather's side. Marcus's face reddened, his fists tightening around the armrest. "This is absurd," he barked. "That boy manipulated him in his final days." My mother's voice joined his, sharp and cold. "He's turning the family against us, Samuel. This isn't justice, it's theft." I sat there in silence, my heart pounding but my voice steady. Grandpa made his choice. He wanted me to continue his work. My father stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'll see you in court," he spat, eyes blazing. "You've stolen what's rightfully ours." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I looked down at the diary left behind, its pages faintly smelling of ink and sage. Inside, my grandfather's handwriting seemed alive. "Justice without integrity is a hollow victory." It didn't take long for gossip to spread. Newspapers hinted at scandal, whispering that I had taken advantage of my grandfather's failing health. Some of my colleagues grew distant, unsure what to believe. When the lawsuit officially came, accusing me of undue influence, I was temporarily suspended from my position at the prosecutor's office. The world that had once respected me now watched with suspicion, but I wasn't going to let my grandfather's legacy be tarnished. I gathered every letter, every document, and every memory I could. I reread his diary late into the night, his words guiding me through my turmoil. "In the face of falsehood, truth must not tremble." The courtroom felt colder than usual on the day of the hearing. The case had drawn attention. After all, it wasn't every day that a son sued his own child over a will. Presiding over the case was Judge Lena Vargas, a woman I faintly remembered. She had once worked as a clerk under my grandfather years ago. I wondered if she recalled the man who had shaped so many lives, including hers. My father's lawyer painted a cruel picture of me, a manipulative grandson exploiting a dying man for wealth. I sat there, calm but wounded, as old family secrets were twisted into weapons. My parents' eyes never met mine. When it was my turn to speak, I took a breath and let truth carry my voice. "Judge Vargas," I began, "my grandfather didn't leave me his estate because of bloodline or favoritism. He left it to me because he believed I understood what justice meant to him. He taught me that wealth is worthless without integrity." The diary he left my father wasn't punishment, it was an invitation to remember who we used to be. Samuel Hart, the family lawyer, stepped forward with the diary. He read a passage aloud. "Marcus walks a path of greed, blind to the heart of justice. But Alex, he carries the quiet flame of compassion. To him, I entrust what I've built." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Vargas lowered her gaze, visibly moved. I could almost see the memory of my grandfather in her expression. She adjourned for deliberation, and I sat quietly, hands trembling. Days passed like years before the verdict came. The courtroom was full again. Judge Vargas's voice carried steady through the hush. After reviewing the evidence, letters, and testimony, this court finds no proof of manipulation. The will is upheld. The estate rightfully belongs to Alex Rivera. A rush of relief swept through me, though it felt bittersweet. My parents stared in disbelief. My father's anger flickered, then dimmed. I approached him slowly, holding out the diary. "He wanted you to have this," I said quietly. "Not as a reminder of loss, but as a chance to understand." He didn't respond at first. His eyes lingered on the worn cover, his expression wavering. For the first time, I saw not arrogance, but confusion, a man facing his reflection after years of denial. He took the diary with shaking hands. "Maybe I owe him more than I ever gave," he murmured before walking away. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle again. My suspension was lifted, and I returned to the prosecutor's office. My colleagues welcomed me back with cautious smiles, but the respect in their eyes had deepened. They'd seen the trial, seen me stand firm without hatred. One of them said, "You didn't just defend yourself, Alex, you defended what justice really means." I took on new cases, ones that hit close to home. A troubled teenager accused of theft reminded me of myself, lost and searching for guidance. Instead of pushing for punishment, I fought for rehabilitation and mentorship. In another case, an elderly man wrongly accused of assault found his charges dropped when I uncovered the truth. Every victory carried my grandparents' spirit, justice balanced with compassion. Still, a quiet ache remained. One evening, as I worked late in my office, the phone rang. I hesitated before answering. It was my father. His voice was softer, almost uncertain. "Alex," he said, "I've been reading the diary. I didn't realize how much your grandfather tried to reach me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to make things right, if you'll let me." I looked at the framed photo of my grandparents on my desk, their smiles steady through time. "Grandpa always believed in second chances," I replied. "Let's start there." It wasn't an instant reconciliation, but it was a beginning. We met occasionally after that, short, awkward talks that slowly grew warmer. My mother joined once, quieter than I'd ever known her. Healing, I learned, doesn't roar. It whispers. Years have passed since then, but the lessons remain as vivid as the New Mexico sunsets that once bathed our home in gold. I still walk the same courthouse halls my grandfather did, carrying his values in every decision I make. When young attorneys ask what drives me, I tell them it isn't ambition, it's gratitude. Gratitude for two people who loved me enough to shape me into the man I am. Sometimes, after long days, I drive out to the old house. The garden still blooms where Clara once knelt, and the wind still carries the scent of rosemary. I sit on the porch, open the diary, and read the last line he ever wrote: "Justice lives only in the hearts brave enough to love." As I close the book, I feel their presence around me, my grandparents, and maybe even the faint hope of redemption in my parents' hearts, because justice, I've learned, isn't about punishment or winning a case. It's about mending what's broken, choosing compassion over bitterness, and believing that even those who've lost their way can find light again.